Here's something that'll blow your mind. In 62 AD, while Emperor Nero was supposedly fiddling as Rome burned, a Greek engineer named Hero was building the world's first steam engine. Nearly 1,700 years before the Industrial Revolution even started. But that's not even the wildest part. Hero wasn't some random inventor working alone in his garage. He was part of an incredible intellectual hub in Alexandria, Egypt, where scholars had already figured out that Earth orbits the Sun. Mathematicians were doing algebra that wouldn't show up in European universities for another 1,000 years. And doctors were performing dissections to understand human anatomy. We're talking about a place that was basically like having MIT, Harvard, and the Smithsonian all rolled into one massive complex. And then humanity lost almost all of it. Not in some dramatic Hollywood explosion, but through centuries of neglect, religious persecution, and straight-up ignorance. The greatest collection of human knowledge ever assembled just disappeared. So here's the question that keeps historians awake at night. What if it hadn't? What if the Library of Alexandria, and the brilliant minds it attracted, had survived and thrived? The answer might change everything you think you know about human progress. Let's start with the origin story, because it's honestly pretty wild. Around 295 BCE, Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals who ended up ruling Egypt, had this crazy ambitious idea. What if we could collect literally every book that exists and put them all in one place? Not just the popular stuff or the religious texts, but everything. Every scroll, every piece of knowledge from every culture they could get their hands on. And they went absolutely hardcore about it. Alexandria's rulers basically became the world's first intellectual pirates. Every ship that pulled into their harbor got searched, not for contraband or weapons, but for books. Officials would confiscate any scrolls they found, have their scribes make copies, and then return the copies to the ship owners while keeping the originals. It was like if customs agents today were seizing people's laptops to copy all their files for a government database. The most legendary example? They convinced Athens to lend them the original manuscripts of plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, basically the Shakespeare of ancient Greece. Athens demanded a massive deposit as insurance. Alexandria paid up, got the manuscripts, made beautiful copies to send back, and just kept the originals. They were willing to lose a fortune just to have those books in their collection. Within decades, this systematic knowledge grab had created something unprecedented. A library containing between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls representing the collected wisdom of Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, India, Persia, and beyond. But here's what made it revolutionary: they didn't just hoard all this information. A scholar named Callimachus created the world's first comprehensive catalog system, organizing human knowledge in a way that made it actually searchable and useful. Think about how frustrating it is when you can't find something on Netflix even though you know it's there. Now imagine that frustration, but with all of human knowledge, and you'll understand why Callimachus's 120-volume catalog was such a game changer. Now here's where things get really interesting, because the scholars working in Alexandria were making discoveries that would make modern scientists jealous. Around 270 BCE, while most people still thought the sun revolved around Earth, a mathematician named Aristarchus was doing calculations that proved the opposite. Using pure geometry and careful observations, Aristarchus figured out that the sun was way bigger than Earth and concluded that it made more sense for the smaller object to orbit the larger one. He was absolutely right, but his detailed writings on heliocentrism didn't survive the library's destruction. It wouldn't be until 1543, over 1800 years later, that Copernicus would discover the same thing and shock the world. But get this. Aristarchus wasn't working in isolation. Ancient sources mentioned the followers of Aristarchus, suggesting there was an entire school of astronomers who accepted the heliocentric model. Seleucus of Seleucia, working about a century later, reportedly didn't just accept Aristarchus's theory but actually proved it mathematically. We're talking about ancient scientists who had figured out one of the most important truths about our solar system, and it was just common knowledge in their circles. Meanwhile, in another part of the complex, Hero of Alexandria was revolutionizing engineering. His famous Eolipile, a hollow sphere that spun when steam escaped from curved tubes, wasn't just an amusing demonstration. Hero was a serious engineer who understood the practical applications of steam power, pneumatics, and mechanical automation. His book Pneumatica described over 78 different devices, many of which wouldn't be reinvented until the Renaissance. Here's what's crazy to think about. What if Hero's students had kept developing steam technology? With the institutional support of the library and centuries of continuous development, practical steam engines could have emerged by 100 CE. Picture the Roman Empire powered by steam-driven aqueducts, factories, and ships. The Industrial Revolution could have happened over a millennium earlier. The cross-pollination of ideas at Alexandria was unprecedented. Engineers talked to astronomers, who worked with mathematicians, who collaborated with physicians. It was like having the world's smartest people all working in the same place, building on each other's discoveries in real time. This kind of interdisciplinary collaboration didn't really happen again until modern research universities. The mathematical work being done there was insane. While most of the world was still figuring out basic arithmetic, Alexandrian scholars were developing sophisticated geometry, early algebra, and number theory. Apollonius of Perga was working out the mathematics of conic sections, parabolas, hyperbolas, and ellipses that would later become essential for understanding planetary orbits. Diophantus was exploring number theory problems that wouldn't appear in European mathematics for centuries. Then there was Hypatia, who might have been the most brilliant person of her era. She was the daughter of mathematician Theon, but she quickly surpassed her father's reputation. By around 400 CE, she was running what was essentially Alexandria's mathematics and astronomy department, attracting students from across the known world. Hypatia wasn't just preserving old knowledge, she was actively improving it. She wrote commentaries on Diophantus's Arithmetica and Apollonius's Conics, basically creating enhanced editions of these foundational texts. But more than that, she was developing new ways to teach complex mathematical concepts, making advanced mathematics accessible to more students than ever before. Her teaching style was revolutionary for the time. Instead of just lecturing at students, she encouraged them to think critically and ask questions. One of her students, Synesius, wrote letters describing how she taught him to construct an astrolabe, a sophisticated astronomical calculator that could determine time, direction, and track celestial movements. But in 415 CE, Hypatia became the victim of one of history's most tragic losses of human potential. A mob of Christian zealots, whipped up by political and religious tensions, dragged her from her carriage and brutally murdered her. The details are horrifying, but what's more important is what her death represented: the end of Alexandria's golden age of learning. After Hypatia's murder, the brightest minds fled Alexandria. The spirit of open inquiry that had driven centuries of discovery was replaced by fear and orthodoxy. Within a few generations, most of the accumulated knowledge of the ancient world had vanished. Modern historians estimate that we lost about 90% of all classical Greek literature and 99% of Latin works from that period. So what would 2025 look like if Alexandria had never fallen? The possibilities are staggering. First, the scientific revolution could have happened around 800 CE instead of the 1500s. With continuous development of astronomical knowledge and mathematical tools, scholars might have developed telescopes centuries earlier, mapped the solar system with precision, and established scientific methodology as standard practice. Second, the Industrial Revolution might have begun by 1200 CE. Hero's steam technology, refined over 1,000 years of development, could have powered medieval society. We're talking about steam-driven agriculture, manufacturing, and transportation transforming civilization centuries ahead of schedule. Third, medical advances could have been revolutionary. The library contained medical knowledge from multiple civilizations: Egyptian surgical techniques, Greek anatomical studies, Indian pharmacology, Persian medical theory. With centuries of continuous research and cross-cultural synthesis, ancient physicians might have developed germ theory, sophisticated surgical procedures, and effective treatments for diseases that devastated medieval populations. The Black Death that killed a third of Europe in the 14th century? It might never have happened, or been quickly controlled through advanced medical understanding. Fourth, the development of global communication and trade networks could have accelerated dramatically. Mathematical advances in navigation, combined with steam-powered ships, might have enabled worldwide exploration and commerce centuries earlier. We might have had something resembling the internet by 1500, not digital, but a vast network of libraries and scholars sharing information across continents. But would this alternate timeline have been all positive? There are some fascinating complications to consider. Centralized knowledge can become stagnant knowledge. The library's approach was largely conservative, preserving and commenting on existing works rather than encouraging revolutionary thinking. Sometimes competition between different schools and cities drives innovation more effectively than having all the smart people in one place. There's also the political dimension. The library operated under royal patronage, which meant scientific progress was subject to political whims. The Renaissance and scientific revolution partly succeeded because they emerged from decentralized, competitive environments where ideas could flourish without centralized control. The religious conflict that ultimately destroyed much of the library raises another fascinating question. Some of Hypatia's students, like Synesius, successfully bridged classical philosophy and Christian theology. What if early Christianity had embraced rather than feared classical learning? The Dark Ages might never have occurred, fundamentally altering the relationship between science and religion for centuries. If the Alexandrian model had spread successfully, we might have seen similar institutions emerge across the ancient world. In Rome, Athens, Baghdad, Chang'an, and beyond. A network of libraries sharing knowledge and facilitating scholarly exchange could have created a truly global intellectual community over a millennium before the internet made such connections possible. The translation projects at Alexandria were particularly valuable. Scholars there translated works from dozens of languages and cultures, creating the world's most diverse collection of human knowledge. If this tradition had continued, we might still have access to writings from civilizations that are now completely lost to us. Today's digital age represents humanity's second serious attempt to collect and organize all knowledge. But we're building from fragments, having lost the accumulated wisdom of generations. The internet is amazing, but imagine what it might look like if we had an additional 1,500 years of continuous scholarly development to draw from. The story of Alexandria offers both a warning and inspiration for our digital age. Knowledge is more fragile than we like to admit. Server crashes, corporate decisions, political censorship, and simple neglect can make information disappear just as effectively as ancient fires or religious persecution. But there's also profound hope in Alexandria's legacy. Even though the physical library was destroyed, the idea behind it proved indestructible. Every university, every public library, every Wikipedia edit, every open-source project carries forward the Alexandrian dream of making human knowledge freely accessible. The scholars who worked in Alexandria understood something we sometimes forget. Knowledge isn't just information. It's a living tradition that grows stronger when shared and weaker when hoarded. Every time someone learns something new and teaches it to others, they're participating in the same project that started in those ancient halls. We can't change what happened 1,600 years ago, but we can learn from it. We can support institutions that preserve and share knowledge, resist forces that try to suppress learning, and remember that intellectual freedom is always just one generation away from extinction. The flame that burned in Alexandria may have been extinguished, but its light continues to guide us. Every breakthrough in science, every advancement in technology, every moment when human curiosity overcomes ignorance is a victory for the spirit of Alexandria. And maybe that's the most important discovery of all. That the quest for knowledge is what makes us most human. And it's a quest that can never truly be destroyed as long as we are willing to keep learning.